Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Caroline Joke. For those who are here for the first time, and I run the Migration and Displacement channel, first and foremost to introduce those who have no background whatsoever on migration and displacement to what the two phenomena are really about, introduce common terms that would be used in migration and displacement conversations, but also to share some of the experiences that I have had as I've worked on migration and displacement for really my entire professional life. So over 12 years, this is essentially what I've done. And I've had the great privilege to listen to people in many parts of the world speak about migration, speak from a point of fear, which is absolutely understandable when migrants move to communities. Then of course there is a shift that has to take place, especially if those communities are not well prepared, to those who speak of migration and the benefits that it brings to the migrant themselves, very important, to countries where they come from and countries that host them. And of course then I've also experienced what has been referred to the migration crisis in the 2015-16, mostly occasioned by the Syrian crisis, where we had a lot of refugees, especially, and migrants arriving on the European shores. And I have been quoted severally as I spoke and mentioned that I didn't feel like we had a crisis, a migration crisis, but more a crisis of policy. So these are some of the issues that I continue to speak on this channel. I invite you to leave a message, to ask questions on issues that you'd like me to speak to, leave your experiences, and let's engage. This is really the essence of this channel. And so today I'm going to talk about common perceptions and misconceptions around migration and displacement. And the first one, I think, is one that most people would identify with, both in Africa, in the developing south, the global south, and the global north. And that is the fact that migration is overwhelming the world. You know, we feel like we can't hold it anymore. We have millions of people moving. What is it going to do to our communities, to our cultures? You know, is it going to dilute it? And not even is it going to, but we feel like that is diluting it. And many scholars, many practitioners, even many politicians actually know that is not true. Evidence points to the fact that only up to 3% of our world is on the move in different ways, either as people who are seeking asylum, as refugees, as asylum seekers, refugees, and also migrants who have moved for various reasons. Many times they are referred to as economic migrants, but when you speak to people even who are engaged in economic activities in countries other than their own, that's not what they would call themselves. People move for very many different reasons, and I'll come to that. So I'm bearing the news that migration is not overwhelming the world. 3% in relative terms of an entire, what population? How many billions are we? I mean, the number of people on the move are not, the number has not shifted. The 3% has been very consistent over a long time. But of course, in absolute numbers, then you would say it has increased. The other perception is that migration, displacement, migration, let me stay with migration here, that is only from the developing to the developed world, and that is because of the connotations around economic migration. There is, very linked to this, is the feeling that a lot of migrants are leaving the continent. Studies, evidence point to the fact that a lot of migration within the African continent actually takes place within the African continent, and only a very small percent, less than 30% really, of Africans leave the continent and head to other parts of the world. The intra-African mobility movement is especially facilitated by regional integration within regional economic entities, from ECOWAS to the East African communities, the South African Development Community, to IGAD in the Horn of Africa. And people are moving within that space. Very small numbers of Africans are actually moving either to the Gulf or to Europe as our immediate neighbor. And the other notion, on the same notion, I lived in Germany for many years, and I was surrounded by migrants from around Europe. I mean, those are still migrants, so they're not necessarily from the developing world or the global south. These are people move to seek opportunities to experience life differently, away from home, and move to any other country. They don't necessarily, there are many that, would have the option to move to a developed country, and they don't move. There are those from the global north who migrate and live in the global south. Again, another misconception, I'm mixing the two terms, is that it is the poor that move. And that's a fallacy. Migration is very expensive for you and me. I mean, if you think about how much we have to spend on movement, on temporal migration to another country, I mean, the cost associated with it, these are not borne by the poor, and evidence can speak to that. I've previously cited the recent UNDP study, Scaling Fences, which alludes to the fact that it is not the poorest of the poor that do move. They can't afford it. It is families with assets, with spare money, as it were, or who are able to raise money, that actually facilitate movement, either for themselves or for their relatives. In the recent years, especially since the 2016 Valletta Conference that aimed at addressing the migration crisis, there's been a lot of targeted economic development, especially within communities and countries that are seen to produce a lot of migrants. And this is the intention that these economic opportunities will actually make people stay there. Well, such interventions are right. They're also based on the fact that economic reasons are the only reason these people are moving, which is not true. People leave because they want better access to services. The UNDP study that I cite again, there are those who said, they wanted to move to a country where they could be able to gain a skill, gain a qualification, access services. And so targeted economic interventions, most which at times may not even measure up to the aspirations of the people that move, will not stem the so-called tide of migration. They are welcome, but these addressing migration and not stopping migration really has to be thought of from a very wider perspective, and economic interventions themselves will not do it. As a matter of fact, when people are able to more economically stable, then that's when they're actually able to move. Closing borders and building walls will not stop migration. From Africa to the United States, borders, walls will not stop migration. And we have seen this, we have seen migrants cross the Sahara. We have seen people scale all types of fences. The only thing that this does is that it makes migration more dangerous. It provides, human traffickers with a reason to hike their prices. And so those who migrate spend more to be trafficked or smuggled across borders. And so, this will not solve the problem. Very strict immigration as well will not solve the problem, because people will find alternatives. Many are the times when I'm traveling as an African woman with, really qualifications that are, are quite high qualifications even by the Northern Hemisphere standards, with a safe income, salaried employment, and they still find it very difficult to travel. So we can imagine how much more difficult it is for young people out of school to even move. And what happens is that when people cannot travel, then they will seek for ways of getting across borders if that's really their intention. Another misconception is that migrants or even refugees, where they're allowed to work, take away jobs meant for locals. And this is not just in the global north. This is a misperception in the global south as well. And a lot of studies have alluded to the fact that most migrants take jobs that locals are not willing to take up. They could be in care work, in cleaning, in agricultural production, etc. And that there is a need to grow economies for everyone so that both migrants and host communities can benefit. As I wind up, I would like to invite you to read an interview that I had with the Georgetown Journal of International Affairs during the centenary celebration of Georgetown University, and the link can be found below. Please read and leave a message, and we'll get back to you. Thank you.